G'day, welcome to Nevadia. Okay, I realise that my opening is probably a little bit too cheerful for this topic, but honestly, I cannot do sad boop-de-boops. I have tried, I really have, but I just can't do it. It's been a while since I've attacked religion, so I thought I'd do something a bit controversial. What I'm about to say does not in any way take away the genuine hurt caused by religion. So the sexual abuse, the anti-GRSM rhetoric, the broken families, the sexual oppression, the financial exploitation, the denying of fact-based education, the shame, the guilt, the atrocities that all have been done in the name of religion, I absolutely 100% look at these and recognise the harm that they have caused. I am in absolutely no way taking away those experiences that people have gone through due to religion. However, the thing I wanted to talk about is my personal thoughts. It's quite probable that I'm wrong, and if so, please comment below. I am not at all trained in this area of research. I am not an authority on psychology, theology, philosophy, or anything like that, so please go and do your own research. My thoughts is that the most damaging part of religion is the indoctrination of children. Why do I say that? Well, let's have a look at some of the things that children get taught and how this links back to all of the things that I've mentioned earlier. First things first, let's define indoctrination. Wikipedia defines indoctrination as being the process of inculcating a person with ideas, attitudes, cognitive strategies of professional methodologies, see doctrine. Doctrine is then further described by Wikipedia as a codification of beliefs or a body of teachings or instructions, taught principles or positions as the essence of teachings in a given branch of knowledge or a belief system. Inculcate has two definitions according to Wikipedia: to teach by repeated instruction or to induce understanding or a particular sentiment in a person or persons. The Oxford Dictionary states that indoctrination is the act or process of forcing somebody to accept a particular belief or sets of beliefs and not allowing them to consider any others. The Oxford Dictionary defines dogma as a belief or a set of beliefs held by a group or an organisation that others are expected to accept without argument. Feel free to use any dictionary that is working for you, but those are the definitions that I'm going to use. The reason why I'm making this video is to open up a discussion about indoctrination and its harms. I also want to make the note that indoctrination can occur outside of religion, such as politics, sports, and nationalism. In this video, of course, I'm only going to refer to indoctrination in a religious context. I also really want to mention that the cycle of indoctrination is perpetuated by parents who they themselves were indoctrinated into a religion. These people are just as much a victim as the kids, and at no point am I suggesting that the parents are doing anything to be unethical, bad, or whatever. I hold no ill will against these people as they are victims of abuse too. I also will put the disclaimer that the examples I use are not used by 100% of religious groups that I mention, as some groups may do the examples while others do not. For example, one church may have one ritual that you could consider to be indoctrination, while another church may not. I also want to make a mention that I think indoctrination is a method to make people do things they would normally not do, or are objectively harmful and they think it is perfectly okay to do. Throughout this video, I will give examples. The process of indoctrinating a child starts pretty much as soon as they are born. Christening, for example, is one of the first religious ceremonies that a child undergoes before they are even able to talk. While the child has no memory of getting baptized, it shows how quickly it is pushed onto people. Another example is baptism. The reason they do it is to wash off original sin. So here's an example of the beginning of the shame cycle. As soon as you are born, you are a sinner for doing nothing other than being born. An unbaptized child is worthy of being sent to hell, and people find this perfectly acceptable. The reasoning to baptize a child is terrible. They use it to wash away the stain of original sin. Now, don't get me started on original sin. Honestly, I could do an entire video on my issues with the Genesis story. So the shame starts within months of you being born, which is given by well-meaning but misguided parents who also, presumably, underwent baptism. I know of a parent who left Catholicism, but since he was from Colombia, his children were pressured by family, friends, and schools to get baptized. He even told me his mother went behind his back and baptized his children without his permission. He was pissed, and I would be too. The pressure to do a physically harmless but emotionally abusive act was intense. Unbaptized people in some countries are shamed, excluded, or looked down upon by their peer groups because of this indoctrination. An unbaptized person is considered to be dirty or stained and therefore lesser. To be good, they need to be baptized so they can now be better than those dirty unbaptized people. The cycle perpetuates itself. By the way, baptism isn't always physically harmless. Babies have died due to baptism. Some baptism rituals include dunking older, i.e. 10-year-old children, in a frozen lake. These are clearly physically harmful. We've all seen those horrible videos of the Catholic priests dunking those innocent babies in the water. It's just horrendous. The way indoctrination plays into financial abuse starts a few years after the child is born. My friend Vagrant Sam told me of an example in his church where kids are given money to put into the collection plate. Parents and other church members would look at this and think it's fun and cute, but really it is a way to train kids into tithing. The pressure to give to the church is instilled early on. In the case of Mormons, tithing is so important that if you don't give them money, you become temple unworthy, regardless of the fact that you may or may not have money at all. As I mentioned before, indoctrination causes people to do harmful things while thinking that it's perfectly harmless or even a positive thing. Asking a person living in poverty to give 10% of their income to a multi-billion-dollar organization is clearly damaging. But if the person does not do so, they are considered to be selfish, a lesser follower of the church, or something similar. That is indoctrination. Some churches encourage financial literacy, which some cynical people think is to give the parishioners the opportunities to earn more money so they can give more to the church. Indoctrination also leads to poor education. Because children are taught that God is all-powerful, mighty, etc., 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 they are often taught that opposing scientific research is wrong. A good education often leads to questioning and exploration. Before kids have the chance to develop critical thinking skills and learning how to learn, the answer will always be because of God. And that, unfortunately, stops them from exploring more, stifling their curiosity, and keeps them good little religious kids. When looked at closely, holy texts such as the Bible, Torah, and Quran are very basic scientific understanding destroys a lot of their claims. Even simple common sense destroys their claims. Look at Noah's flood. However, the fact is that indoctrination is hammered into children that says that God is infallible, knows everything, etc. So when they are adults and shown that God is wrong, it causes cognitive dissonance and can be quite traumatic when these adults found out that they were lied to as children. If they do come out of the indoctrination, they have to learn science that people of their own age learnt years ago, which can be extremely difficult. As adults, being educated about things a 13-year-old kid would know is demeaning, which also leads to more frustration and hurt because they often consider themselves stupid rather than uneducated. If you find yourself in that situation, please don't ever think to yourself you are stupid. You cannot understand the entirety of human knowledge. If you lack basic understanding of something most people know because you were taught untruths, you are not stupid. You are lied to. Even if adults don't leave the indoctrinated state, their ability to compete with scientifically literate people is severely hampered. The long-term effects of being uneducated can pass down through entire generations, leading to missed opportunity, low incomes, being trapped in poverty, etc. Another example of how I think that indoctrination of children is the most damaging part of religion is that it encourages black and white thinking, which of course is part of the bite model. This attitude has definitely spilled over into everyday discourse, and anyone who introduces nuance into an argument is automatically in the out group. I'll give a hypothetical. A video is leaked on the internet of a person doing something which is horrendous, and the video goes viral. The person is universally condemned by people, and so they should be. However, one person might say what they did was horrendous, but what if, and brings up valid points such as the situation this person is in might mean that what they did was actually an act of compassion, or what they did was something their friend was asked them to do, or just simply points out there's no context to the video and that there's two sides to every story. The person introducing nuance into the conversation is eviscerated by the masses because clearly the person in the video is evil. I think everyone can think of several instances where this is the case, such as atheism equals bad and Christian equals good, when clearly there's a lot of nuance in both categories. The indoctrination of children to think black and white opens them up to danger because they lack the ability to think in shades of grey and are actually actively encouraged against doing so. They will look at all Christians as being good. This black and white thinking leads into my next point, where sexual abuse cover-ups is effectively caused by the idea that priests, nuns, imams, and rabbis are people of God, and they cannot be questioned because they are chosen by God to represent him. How many times have you heard of people coming out to defend child abusers of both sexual and physical natures because of their station in their religious community? The people saying that they were abused were often victim blamed, called liars, not believed, ignored, and even worse, shunned by their community. The reasoning is, how on earth could this person of God do anything wrong? They were chosen by God to be his representative. This goes right back to when these people were children and were told that God doesn't make mistakes, God is good, anything other than God is bad, and the people of their group is good because God says so. I also think this is why atheists get such horrendous abuse from religious people, because they are not of God. They are automatically considered to be evil. I will admit, though, some atheists don't exactly give them a reason to believe otherwise. But as I said, all things require nuance. There are bad people who are Christian, but there are also bad people who are atheist, and there are good people who are Christian and good people who are atheist. I just want to make a note that thankfully it is much easier for abuse survivors of religious leaders to come out and be believed. Even Cardinal Pell, the highest ranking priest in the Australian Catholic Church, was sent to prison for historical child sex abuse. This mask is collapsing and I am grateful for it. Another example of black and white thinking is the fact that it leads to the destruction of families. Cults such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormons, and even other non-Christian denominations such as Islamic and Jewish subcultures and Scientology will shun you if you decide to leave the group. For example, my friend Faye, the most gracious, was almost set on fire because she decided to leave the religion. Now, how could any non-indoctrinated person think that's an okay thing to do? Another part of indoctrination that leads to long-term harm is sex shaming, especially towards women. This comes from the Old Testament and Levitical laws. It is common throughout the Abrahamic faiths, which leads to things like the burqa, dowries, slut-shaming, purity balls, etc. Kids are taught very early on that carnal pleasures are ungodly, especially for women, and even though they might not be directly told via the Bible, there is enough evidence to show that it's pushed on by their parents to keep pure for God. This also leads to hatred of the GRSM community because anything outside of what God considers to be holy is an abomination. Kids are taught to hate a drive that is almost as strong as eating and drinking, depending on the person, and it is clearly a very damaging thing. Even years after losing my faith in Christianity, I still wanted to wait for marriage, and even after I first had sex, I still felt shame for it, and that shame lasted years. Even our language shames people for having sex. I cannot think of any other non-material experience people have where they lose something other than losing their virginity or their innocence. I mean, you don't linguistically lose something for drinking alcohol for the first time. You lose brain cells, but you have alcohol for the first time. You went skydiving, you don't lose the experience of not skydiving. Why is it different when you first have sex? I consciously stopped saying lose your virginity because inherently that shames someone for having a normal, healthy experience. I could go on for a long time about how indoctrination causes harm later in life. This is why I think the most evil thing religions do is not the horrendous things that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, but I believe the root of said horrendous things people do in the name of religion is the indoctrination of children. They take the most vulnerable people and teach them things such as thought-stopping techniques. They stifle their curiosity, tell them things are evil and bad before they ever have an opportunity to explore it for themselves. That then leads them to major harm. Again, I am not taking away the experiences of people who are hurt by religion. I'm just saying that if it wasn't for indoctrination, the chances of that happening would be next to nothing if kids didn't undergo it. A reminder, I am not a psychologist or have any formal training in this subject, so please don't take my word for it and go and research this yourself and make your own conclusions. And please, don't forget, don't give yourself the raw prawn. A big thank you to Atheist Pastor and Vagrant Sam for helping me with this, as well as my wonderful patrons, especially my $10 Redback Spider patrons, Aided Furball, Lauren Hart, Amanda Vogue, Ross Devereux, and Mary Civitano, as well as my $35 Irukandji patrons. So a big thank you to Atheist Pastor and Jasser G.